glad you're here and welcome to another reading vlog. I don't know about you, but I'm incredibly guilty of going on Goodreads and looking up every book I want to read before I read it and looking at the rating and then deciding whether or not I want to prioritize that book by how other people have rated it, which is not the best thing to do because we all have our own opinions and we all will like things differently than other people. So for today's reading vlog, I'm going to challenge myself to read my highest and lowest rated books on my fall TBR. So to do that, I went on Goodreads, I made a folder and I put all of my fall TBR in there that I haven't read yet, and then I sorted it by rating. And that's how I found out that my top rated book was The Woman by Kristen Hanna with a 4.63 rating, which is incredibly high, almost a 5-star, out of 700,000 people. So clearly this book has done something right, clearly it's a good book, and I have very high expectations, not to say that this book was already on my potential 5-star list. So I have high expectations. I'm thinking this will be a 5-star read for me. All of Kristen Hanna's books are historical fiction, and this one follows women during the Vietnam War, particularly the women who put their lives on the line and the front lines as nurses. So you get to see how the Vietnam War impacted women specifically, and I'm so excited to read this book because all of Kristen Hanna's books are just so amazing and they always make me cry. So I'm a little bit scared. And then my lowest rated book was Light Lark by Alex Astor, and this one has a 3.84 rating, which honestly isn't that bad. I think I've read books with lower. I actually think one of my 5-star reads probably has a lower rating than that, so I'm not scared of it at all. I'm honestly not surprised that it's my lowest rated because I feel like there are so many mixed reviews on this. I've heard people either love it or hate it. I'm personally going into it pretty excited because I heard that this fantasy book has trials, and I love fantasy books with trials, so I ultimately think I might like this book. But essentially this book is a fantasy book, and every 100 years the Centennial comes back, and it's an island that the leaders of 6 different realms can go to and compete for 100 days, and after that 100 days whoever wins can break the curse that was put on their realm. And I love trials. I think it sounds interesting, so I am very excited to pick this book up. But those are the 2 books that I'll be reading in this reading vlog. Yesterday I ended up going to Barnes to pick these books up because I don't own either of them, so I'll insert that clip right now. Now it's time for the most predictable Barnes haul you will ever see. Can you guys guess what I got? Well, the first book I got was The Woman by Kristen Hanna, and I usually don't read hardcover, so I'm incredibly proud of myself for buying this because trying to enter my hardcover era, I feel like it's a mature thing to do. They're just so difficult to read, but I do think they look better on bookshelves, and they usually have special editions. They don't get ruined as easily when you read it. Like, my paperbacks are always bending here. This may be the start of an era for me. Who knows? Like, this is so difficult in comparison to the second book I bought, Light Lark, which is so, like, that's so pleasing. I bought Light Lark. Oh, it's upside down. This is what I'll be reading in this video. I think I'm gonna start with Light Lark only because I have very high expectations for this, so I want to save it for the end. And I also just read a book that made me cry, and it was a 5-star read, and I have every expectation for the same from this, so I don't want to do it back to back. I kind of want to spread it out. I'm gonna start with Light Lark by Alex Astor, and I'm very excited. So let's get into it. Also, before we get into it, I did notice that the sequel was already at Barnes. I did not know it was out yet, but now I am getting myself into another series. I feel like I'm involved in so many series now. My next video is gonna have to be finishing series because I can't have so many. I'm gonna get overwhelmed. Anyways, let's go read. From the cafe. I just started Light Lark, and I'm currently on chapter 11, page 81, and I'm really enjoying this book a lot, to be honest. When I read books, I realize some books are purely just going to be entertainment for me. They're not going to be like the best piece of literature to exist. So I'm okay with enjoying a book solely because of the fact that it entertains me. For example, I wouldn't be reading this book with a highlighter, and I don't have any favorite quotes in it, but I'm so okay with that because sometimes I just want to be entertained and turn my brain off. And this is that kind of book. I'm wanting to flip through the pages and find out what happens, and I was entertained from page 1. it just jumps right into it. I will say there are a lot of similarities to other fantasy books in it, and I've really only read like 3 fantasy series, so I don't have a lot of knowledge on this topic, so it might be even more similar to other ones. To me, I'm getting a lot of similarities to ACOTAR simply because of like the courts and the division between people, because in ACOTAR there's like the night court, dawn court, spring court, summer court, but in this book there are 6 different realms like Skyline, Moonlane, Starling, Darkbane, Lightlark, and those realms are just giving me similarities. Like the night court is reminding me of Darkbane in this book. To me, it's not a bad thing because I did enjoy ACOTAR, but I could see some people wanting something a little bit more unique. I personally feel like a lot of fantasy books have a lot of similarities. This also is reminding me a lot of Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Overall though, I don't mind that because I actually enjoyed both of those books, so I'm excited to have something similar to it. So far there are definitely trials, and I love a good trial, so I'm eating that up. And if you liked the books that I just named, if you liked ACOTAR or Powerless, I would highly recommend you pick this up, especially if you like trials. And I know that's a premature recommendation because I'm literally, I don't even know, like 10% into it, but I'm liking it so far, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm gonna keep reading it. I'm actually really excited to keep reading it. I don't want to put it down, and that's a good sign, so I'm gonna keep reading it. I will chat with you when I'm further along in the book. This is the reality of having a cat. Specifically 2 orange cats. This is my life. I don't mind it though. I also forgot to mention that the chapters are pretty short and easy to get through, and the world building is pretty easy to digest as well. It might have helped that I have previous experience of reading a fantasy book like ACOTAR to help me with world building, but I definitely would not say it's something that's super complicated. So it would be a pretty easy book to get into if you haven't really read fantasy before, but I'm gonna get back to reading because this is very entertaining. See, I can tell that there's gonna be a romance. I just can't tell with who. There was one person I was like, oh, for sure it's gonna be him, but now there's a second person. So is there gonna be a love triangle? I just read a little bit more of Lightlark. I'm currently on chapter 23, page 160. I do still see a lot of similarities between other books. I feel like it's a little bit predictable. I feel like a lot of fantasy books are predictable to some extent because you know they're gonna be put in that position they don't want to be put in. You know, like if they keep talking about how they want something, you know it's gonna go wrong, but I don't dislike it, and I don't really mind that. Like, I think it's fun when the things go wrong because that's how you get drama. I'm enjoying it. I still like the book. I can already tell there's gonna be a romance in this too. It's definitely giving romantasy. I'm trying to figure out with who, but I feel like I have a prediction based on what I said earlier about when things are not supposed to happen, they happen. Yeah, so I have that prediction. It's definitely not the best book I've ever read, but I'm entertained and I'm having fun, and I just want to know what happens. I'm gonna keep reading, but I will keep you updated as I go along with my thoughts. I will talk to you soon. Hi, it's actually 2 days later. I had a pretty busy weekend with a concert and a bridal shower, so I didn't have a lot of time to update, but I did have time to read. So I ended up finishing Lightlark by Alex Astor, and I have quite a few thoughts about this book. Overall, I feel like this was a very entertaining book, and I had a fun time reading it, and I really wanted to find out what happened. I was also believing everything in this book, all the lies, so the end really got me. I was fooled. My issues with it aren't from the fact that it was boring. I wasn't bored at all while reading this. It was entertaining, and if you want to turn your brain off for a little bit and just have fun, I do recommend this book. My issues with it, like I've mentioned before, stem a lot from the fact that I think she's taking a lot of inspiration from other writers that she really likes. loves, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think this book lost a little bit of her individuality, kind of just seemed like a mixture of a bunch of different fantasy authors. I do want to preface, I was saying that this book is pretty similar to Powerless, but I did realize that Powerless by Lauren Roberts came out after this. But aside from just the fact that there are a lot of similarities to other authors in this book, there were a few things that I could just tell were maybe not fully thought out. For example, there were a few plot holes in this book, like something that happened earlier on in the book that a character said she saw ended up being something that later on in the book she acted like she knew nothing about, even though she had already seen it and acknowledged it early on in the book. Also, there was a rule set in the book that was broken later on, and that was never acknowledged. So there were a few things that just didn't fully flow while reading. And also, there were trials in this book, which was an aspect I was very excited for, but the trials didn't have the stakes that other books had. These trials almost seemed like they were a little bit unnecessary and could have been removed, and maybe were just added to give more of a plot to this book, but they weren't really needed, and they didn't have high stakes. There was no like real importance of winning or losing these trials, and they were a very, very small aspect of this book. So I do want to say, actually, I know I did acknowledge earlier that if you like trials, you should read this book. I kind of want to change that statement a little bit and say I wouldn't really recommend this if you love trials, but I would recommend this if you really liked other fantasy books like ACOTAR, stuff like that. It's very, very similar, but it's fun in its own way. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, so pretty much middle of the road for me. I think it was a really fun read, but I did have some issues with just the structure of it and how it was built up. I think some of the characters maybe lacked a little bit of depth, but it was still fun, and you don't need all of that to enjoy a book. I just am very conflicted on it, but I gave it 3 stars, and I recommend you pick it up and make the decision for yourself, obviously, because this one is very controversial and very mixed opinions, and I feel like people either love it or hate it, and I'm somewhere in the middle of that. I don't hate it, definitely don't hate it, but I'm like, I don't love it either. I enjoyed it though. But I finished that book yesterday, and so that means today I'm starting The Woman by Kristen Hanna, and I'm so excited to start it. I'm scared, to be honest. I'm so scared because the last book I read, not Lightlark, but the book I read before that, and it's in my fall reading blog, it made me cry. And then this past weekend I saw The Wild Robot, and that movie made me cry, and I think my eyes are just tired of crying right now. I'm scared to pick this book up because surely it will make me cry, and I'm also scared because it's hardcover, and that means I have to learn how to read hardcover. It's gonna be fine, I just don't like reading hardcover. I'm really excited to start this one, so I will keep you updated, and I will see you later with any updates I have. Goodbye. I wanted to say more about Lightlark, but I don't really know what, so bear with me. Okay, so I think I wanted to mention that it actually did end on a cliffhanger, so I'm actually excited for the second book. Also, this was a romantasy, and I think that was fun, but I think that the bonds weren't like too incredibly believable. I feel like it kind of happened pretty fast, and you're like, oh, okay, suddenly you're in love. That's cool. That's that on that. And I don't know why I wanted to come back and say that. I think it's because I was just flipping through the book and I remembered I didn't even mention the fact that it was a romantasy. So just wanted to do that. But now I'm gonna go read The Woman. Bye. Coffee shop, I read a little bit of The Woman, and I got an iced caramel latte. I'm notorious for not finishing my drinks, which is so horrible because I need to be better at that. But every time my boyfriend comes over, there's like a half finished coffee, and he's like, oh, that means you liked it, because half is like how much I normally drink, which is bad. And this was a good coffee, so I should probably finish it. But anyways, I'm currently on page 79 because I finished in the middle of a chapter. But I'm on chapter 8, almost chapter 9 of The Woman. So far, I'm actually really enjoying it, but that didn't happen right away. This book is about the Vietnam War, and it's about a girl who enlists to become a nurse at the Vietnam War because her brother went there and she wants to follow him there. It basically just follows Frankie's story. So Frankie is the girl who enlisted to be a nurse, and it basically just follows her story about what it's like being a nurse during the Vietnam War. All I've seen so far is her go to Vietnam and start her process of getting into nursing there, and a lot of the descriptions have been a little bit graphic, like people without legs, without arms. It's a little bit hard to read, and it felt kind of repetitive, just like day in, day out of being a nurse and the different patients you see. But it is starting to break that mold and get more interesting. The beginning of it was a little bit hard for me to get into just because it is a little bit intense and graphic and a little bit repetitive. I'm getting more interested. I'm very excited to keep reading because I know this is a Kristen Hanna book and I have such high hopes for it, so I don't want to judge it prematurely because sometimes it does take a little bit to get into her books, but they always end up being amazing. So I still have high hopes. I'm still enjoying it, just a little bit slow, a little bit hard to get into, a little bit difficult to read, as is War, so I'm sure it's gonna get more difficult. And I have to say, I already teared up on like chapter 4, I think. Predictable, obviously. As for reading a hardcover book, I don't hate it. One of my favorite things to do with it actually is to lean it. Just lean it on my legs and like read without hands. That's fun because you can't really do that with paperback. It just flops back together. Been enjoying that, but I don't like holding it. But that's my update on The Woman. I will keep you updated. I want to read a little bit more today. I just got back from a coffee shop where I read a little bit more of The Woman, and I'm currently on page 133 and I am mid-chapter. I don't know why I keep ending mid-chapter, but for some reason I do. I think it's because the chapters are pretty big in this book, so when I'm done, I'm done. I just put the book down, even if I'm in the middle of a chapter. I only had 3 pages left of this chapter though, so I really should have just finished it. I have a few thoughts. I was writing them down as I was reading, and I also wrote down a few quotes, which I'm not really surprised about because Kristen Hanna. I knew I was gonna find quotes I liked, but I wrote down 2 quotes that I really liked, and I will read one of them for you right now because it does not spoil anything. Words were creators of worlds. You had to be careful with them. And I liked that quote because the words created this world and so many other worlds that I read as someone who loves books. So I thought it was a cute quote. But my overall thoughts on this book so far. First off, I love the way that Kristen Hanna writes people. She writes them in such an easy way to connect with them. And I already feel so connected to the people in this book, specifically Frankie and the other nurse friends she made. But feeling connected to characters in a war book, probably not the smartest idea. Overall, I feel like so far the storyline has been going a little bit slow but also fast at the same time. I need to explain that. But it kind of feels like, do you know that quote where days are long, years are short? It's kind of like that. The days that you're getting are long, they're a little bit repetitive of kind of just the patients you see and what you do as a nurse in Vietnam, but then the months are going really fast. So Frankie volunteered to be a nurse in Vietnam, and they're given a specific timeline for how long they're there, and I feel like Frankie's timeline is going pretty fast. We're already a few months in and I'm not even halfway through the book, so I am curious about how the rest of the book is going to go and if her time is maybe going to slow down and get a little bit more intense. Around page 100, I think 110, things really started to pick up though, so I made note of that because that is when I think the story really gets started and starts going really fast. So I am excited, but I feel like that's all I have to say about the book right now. I am really enjoying it. I'm scared to cry because I just have a feeling I'm going to, and I posted a TikTok about it and someone commented and said, "Good luck, soldier." I cried over that book for weeks. So I'm feeling very, very, very motivated to finish this book, if you can't tell. I'm terrified. I'm terrified. I don't want to be crying. I don't want to be in a bad mental space. So I'm scared, but I'm also invested. I'm gonna keep going and I will keep you updated. Hopefully my next update I won't be sobbing, but who knows with Kristen Hanna. I feel like in her books, if something bad is gonna happen, it'll happen. I'll keep reading and I'll keep you updated. Hi, I have no clue what this lighting looks like, but I have a matcha with vanilla, as it should always be. Yum. And I have my book. I'm currently on chapter 19. I feel so conflicted on this book, to be honest, because I'm really enjoying it like a lot, and it's very informative too. It's fun to learn more about the Vietnam War because I didn't know too much about it, to be honest, before reading this book. So it is cool feeling like I'm learning while I'm reading. I love Kristen Hanna's writing. It's not like that's the issue. I just think this book has been kind of difficult for me to get through because It's just heavy topics and it's not happy at all, which like I didn't expect it to be happy at all, but it really is just a very heavy book. So I'm kind of taking it slow. It's like harder for me to get through it really quickly because it's a lot to read and digest in one moment. I am enjoying it. I am still a little bit confused as to where the rest of the book will go based on where we're at right now. So I'm curious about what else is going to happen. Those are my thoughts, and I really want to get through this book, to be honest. I'm enjoying it, but I really feel like I need a happier book. I don't really know why. I just kind of felt like it right now, but it's comfortable. But I read a little bit more of Kristen Hanna's book, The Woman, and I was reading it a little bit last night and also this morning. It's currently 2:40 p.m. so I'm gonna hopefully read a little bit more tonight, but I have some thoughts on it that I want to share, and that will kind of explain my hesitancy to keep reading. But I'm about halfway. To be honest, this book is really hard for me to get through. It feels like trudging through mud in like the kindest way possible because it is a phenomenal book and it has nothing to do with the writing, it has nothing to do with the character building, none of that. Like, it's all beautiful. I love Kristen Hanna. It's the fact that the topic is really hard to read because you're not reading anything pleasant. You're reading a lot of unpleasant things and a lot of sad things, and they just are all thrown at you so quickly. That's a normal page in this book, and then the really astounding sad things are when like it gets dramatic. I am just struggling with getting through this book because it's not putting me in the best mood when I read it or after reading it, and I'm not loving not being in the best mood, so I'm not loving picking this book up. I'm only halfway through this book and I feel like so much time has passed from the beginning to this halfway point, and I know that this war still has a long time to go. So I'm kind of wondering where the rest of this book is gonna go and how much more painful it's going to get, because I know people say they sobbed and I haven't gotten to the sobbing point yet, but I also think I'm kind of treading carefully and not really allowing myself to get to that point because I know I'm already scared. Overall, I'm just struggling a bit with this book. I'm curious to see where it goes and how much more sadness can be put in one book. And to think I was wanting to read A Little Life if I can't handle this book. But maybe it'll turn around, and I highly doubt that. Hi, it is so many days later, like many days later. I don't know the last day I filmed for this video because I started my job and things got very busy, but I did end up finishing The Woman, and I've had many days to sit on it, and I'm still so conflicted about my feelings for this book. So let's talk about it. But I have to say I'm very conflicted, and I've never had this feeling with the Kristen Hanna book before, so I am a little bit sad, but I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's more a bad experience. Oops, my phone is dinging. I have read 3 other Kristen Hanna books, and I've realized through reading this book that they all follow a very similar plot of depression and trauma, and they are about pretty serious and sad topics, so that makes sense. But I've noticed that she doesn't really allow her characters to be happy, but I will say I think it was more tastefully done in the other books that I've read by her. This one, I don't want to say it wasn't tastefully done because you can tell she put a lot of work into writing this book. You know, it took so much research to learn about the Vietnam War, and I was learning so much while reading it, and I feel like that was a really important part of this book. I learned so much. I was Googling words I never heard of. I was Googling words and I was learning so much while reading this book, and I feel like that was a very valuable aspect of this book. There was just a lot of trauma in this book. It's kind of like anything bad that could happen happened, and I do understand that that is probably realistic of the Vietnam War, what they went through basically. It just felt almost predictable, like if something bad can happen, it will happen for her. You're just constantly reading about trauma and depression and PTSD and death and war and addictions, everything, like just all at once. And it can take a toll on at least me emotionally while reading this. I think I almost like shut off my emotions while reading it because I was just expecting each trauma that happened. It almost felt like, okay, here we go again, but I wasn't even crying, and I cry at everything. So if that shows you how emotionally shut off I was while reading this book, because it was just like too much for me. But I do think that is a very personal feeling and issue with this book, and I don't want to say that the book itself is not good, because I think other people in different state of minds can probably have a better experience with this one than I did. There's one more thing that I did not enjoy, and that is Kristen Hanna's creation of romantic relationships. And I've noticed this in the other books that I've read for her. You always know who the romantic partner is going to be, always, within like the characters meeting each other, you know. And I don't love how obvious that is and how clear she makes it within them just meeting each other, because I feel like there should be more of a gradual, like, you get to know each other, but it's instantly like, okay, yeah, I like them. But aside from those, some things I loved about this book is that you could clearly tell this was a passion project for Kristen Hanna. She said in her acknowledgments that she really wanted to write a book about the Vietnam War because the women are not represented well enough, and there's not enough literature about women during the Vietnam War. So you can tell she put so much work and research into this book, and through that I was learning. I feel like I learned so much about the Vietnam War and the woman experience. It was crazy to see how many people invalidated their experience of being in Vietnam. I also love the way that she depicts friendships in this book. I feel like she always does such an amazing job at creating friendships in her books, and this is no different. So I really love the way that she does that and how realistic it feels and how true and real and loving the friendships are. Overall, I would describe this book as a very dense and emotional read. It was very thick, but it almost felt like more than this. You know how sometimes books are long and they don't feel like it? This felt like more than the length because it was so emotional and so dense. So much happened so quickly. It just moves so fast because it goes through the entire span of the war. So there's a lot of time put into this book. And I've read her other books that were about other sad topics. Like, all of her books follow sad topics. None of them hit the way that this one did. The other ones were done in a way that there was more plot line to it as well, but this one truly was just a character story. You're following Frankie throughout the war, and you're following what it does to her mental health. There's a lot of mental health talk in here, but those are my thoughts on it. I enjoyed it, but I had a difficult time reading it, and I guess I didn't really even enjoy it that much, but I didn't hate it. So I feel like it's hard to describe. So I'm struggling on what to give this book. I've never given a Kristen Hanna book lower than 4 stars, and unfortunately I feel like I might be doing that with this one, and it feels so wrong. I think for me it's a 3.5. I want to give it some stars for the fact that it was written really well, and the way that she described Vietnam with the sounds and the scents and the everything, what you're seeing, it was so descriptive. You could feel like you're there, you could envision it in your head, and she just did a really phenomenal job describing the Vietnam War, although it was gruesome and sad and just very difficult to read. So these are the 2 books that I read in this video. I had very conflicting, difficult experiences with both. Like, who would have thought? Because it's my highest and lowest rated, you'd think they'd be pretty straightforward. I had such difficult times with both of them. I have to say, I think enjoyment wise, I had more fun reading Lightlark. I really enjoyed the deathly games in it. I enjoyed trying to guess who's lying to you and who you can trust. I feel like it was a very fun read. I'm gonna keep it with 3 stars because of the fact that it wasn't written as well, although it was fun. I feel like that's the difference. This wasn't as fun, but it was written really well. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.